Look, I'm not some helicopter parent, alright? If anything, I'm more easygoing than most of my friends with children. That's probably what got us into this mess in the first place. My little girl is a handful, to say the least. An attitude problem, an authority problem, a lying problem. Still, though, she's my little girl. My only child. It's my job to keep her safe and maintain a good relationship with her. However, once the boy problem started, it was borderline maddening. I actually had to put my foot down and not just tiptoe around the situation. The first few guys were, subpar. Not at all what I wanted for her. First, it was some stoner kid named Bornad who could barely keep his eyes open at our introduction dinner. Then it was this hotshot daddy's money type of guy named Exel, who, for the entire dinner, would not stop blatantly flirting with the server in front of all of us. I didn't even have to convince her to leave that one. She was so heartbroken that, as soon as the dinner was over, she pretty much demanded he never text her again. Oh, and who could forget Sareb, the high school quarterback who showed absolutely no interest whatsoever in anything other than sports, workout routines, and protein. Just back-to-back red flags over the course of what I want to say was about a year and a half. After her latest interest failed, she actually took a break from the guys, to my absolute relief. She focused on herself, studied hard, brought her grades up to a B average, and got closer with the family. It was nice. It was like we had our little girl back. That is, until she met Kabja. The thing about Kabja was, he was perfect. He had a good head on his shoulders. He had dreams of college, aspirations to become an accountant, and he was already holding down a job at the regional distribution center. He actually paid for our dinner, all four of us, like it was nothing. Not even just that, but the entire night he was an absolute joy to be around. He was charismatic, maintained eye contact, and he literally had the entire table laughing not even 30 minutes into the evening. It was all going so well that I didn't even flinch when my daughter planted a long kiss on his cheek before blushing and hurrying back to our SUV. Unlike with the other guys, she actually seemed to be in love with Kabja. I could see it in her eyes. Not to mention, in the 4 weeks since they started dating, there was a noticeable improvement in her attitude. She was maintaining her grades, being respectful, and being honest. The whole shtick. I had a silent hope for the boy. A part of me truly believed that finally, I wouldn't have to worry about my daughter getting the treatment she deserved. All of those hopes were shattered in an instant though, because, fuck it, of course they were. After my daughter had kissed him, Kabja didn't even seem to register what had happened. He just stood there, staring at me blankly. After what looked like a brief hesitation, he began walking in my direction, like he wanted to ask me something. Me, being the naive old dad that I am, thought that he was going to ask if they could go out again the next night. I was already mentally preparing my whole have her home by 9 speech. Unfortunately, that is not how it went. As he approached, he drew his shoulders back, standing confidently in front of me. The first words out of his mouth were enough to have me on the brink of punching him in his mouth. "You have a lovely daughter, sir. She's going to sell for millions." Where is this tree house my kid keeps talking about? I read on the neighborhood Facebook group. I hadn't lived in the neighborhood for long, maybe 2 or 3 months, but I already understood the post. My son, Jaime, had been talking about the same thing every night before bed. "Dad, can I go to the treehouse tomorrow?" When I first heard it, I said yes. I didn't know what he was talking about, but we were new to the neighborhood, and I thought it would be a chance for my boy to make some friends. Despite my initially excited response to Jaime's request, it was actually quite some time before I followed through and took him to the treehouse. When Jaime called me out on breaking my promise, staring at his little face, I knew I had to step it up as a father. The next morning, I woke him up with breakfast, scrambled eggs coated in sugar, just the way Jaime had always loved. He had learned the recipe from his papa. I knew it wasn't the healthiest, but I couldn't resist making it for him and seeing his awfully adorable smile. God, the boy smiled like it hurt, but it was his, and he wore it proudly. After we finished breakfast, I washed up and told Jaime the news. "You up to visit the treehouse now?" There it was once again, that toothless, painful smile of his. I felt like I was nailing this single parent thing. I didn't need to hear his response. I asked him where it was, expecting the name of a park or even some kid's address. But no, he grabbed my hand and took me to my own backyard. He pointed at the tree. I may not have lived here long, but I lived here long enough to know that there was no treehouse back there, and that's exactly what I told Jamie. When I did, he just laughed and told me, "No, Dad, you can't see it from down here. We have to climb." He giggled like I was an idiot, and confused, I played along. He took my hand once again, and we started climbing the tree. I hadn't done it in years, so I was slow, and admittedly, I was scared of heights, but I didn't need Jemay to know his dad wasn't some man of steel, so I just kept it to myself, whispering, "Don't look down, just don't look down." And that's exactly what I did, kept my eyes on the sky. Jemay, however, was like a spider monkey, climbing the tree with the energy only an 8-year-old child could have. He was getting further and further away when my parental instincts kicked in, and I realized I probably shouldn't let my 8-year-old climb so high up. I shouted at him that he needed to come back down, but when I looked around, I realized I couldn't see him. The tree was tall, so tall that you would have to damn near break your neck to see the top, but I thought we were about halfway up, and there was no way he could be so far from me. With every shout, I heard no response. I could no longer hear the sound of his joy, or the slight crack of the branches. No, it was silent. I could feel the breeze, cold, like I was higher than I thought. I felt unsettled, the silence, the cold breeze, and the loneliness, all making me panic. Chills ran down my spine, tears forced their way out of my eyes, and my legs were shaking. I finally looked down. The ground was gone. It was just there, and now gone. There was just more tree, going on and on forever. The tree was not this fucking tall. The vertigo hit me, and I could feel myself starting to lean, starting to fall. I didn't know what the hell was going on, so I just hugged the tree tight, feeling the bark against my skin, leaving imprints as I white-knuckled the damn thing. I was cheek to wood and sat with my eyes shut, squeezing them closed with the same force Jamie used to smile. Jamie. I almost forgot about my boy, and that was the worst part of the whole damn experience. How could I call myself a dad if, in the face of fear, I couldn't fight for my own child? With that motivation, I opened my eyes. Taking a breath, I looked around. I wasn't seeing things. Branches reaching out on all sides like a twisted ladder to an even more twisted heaven. Had I died? Did I fall and crack my head? And if so, what about Jemay? I shook my head. If I died, what was I to do? Absolutely nothing. But here, right now, there was something I could do. I could keep climbing. But which way? My brain was telling me down, but Jemay had been climbing up when I last saw him. I wasn't leaving him, not my boy, my Jemay. So I ignored my brain like any loving father would, and I climbed. I climbed with anger, I climbed with fear, I climbed with sadness. So many emotions were coursing through me, but I needed to reach my boy, and he was moving much faster than I was, so there was no time to stop. I don't know how much time had passed, but it was getting dark. Wherever I was, time still passed like normal, and I was getting tired. I broke down in tears. My hands were shredded, warm blood flowing along the creases of my palms like rivers. My body was sore, and worst of all, my son was still nowhere in sight. I cried, and did the only thing I could to let it all out. I screamed. It was the first time I made a sound in what felt like hours, and it sounded horrid, cracking and breaking as I wailed like a banshee. After which, I sat in the infinite silence for who knows how long. I could feel myself slipping into unconsciousness, but I was jolted awake by that falling feeling you get in bed. But this time it was real. I caught myself, grabbing onto whatever I could and holding on tight. I nearly died. My efforts were almost for nothing, but what were my efforts for? I said it earlier, what if I already died? Or what if this was a dream and falling was the only way out? And if I had almost fallen, what if Jemay had? I didn't know it, but all the thoughts had me crying again. I was only alerted to it when I felt a tear drip from my cheek onto my thigh. That one drop was like a cold plunge that snapped me out of it. I wiped my tears away and focused. I grabbed my belt and tied it around my waist and the tree trunk. If I was going to make this climb, if I was going to find Jemay, I needed to sleep. I needed the energy. I didn't know how far I had to go, but I was going to keep going until I saw Jemay smile again. The image was my motivation, my reason for living through this hell, just as it had been throughout the rest of my life since his birth. I kept that picture in my mind until my body slipped away into a deep unconsciousness. So deep that when I awoke, I was being torn apart. Birds. Birds had begun eating at my broken down body. Chunks of my thigh were ripped from me, like it wasn't mine to begin with. They pecked with greed, and I tried to fight back, undoing my belt and thrashing it around like a lunatic, whipping at the black birds until they flew away with parts of me. Parts that I would never get back. I sat for a minute, resting in the pain. Who knows how long they had been eating at me. Drips of blood ran off my body and into the forever below. I continued my climb, the pain in my hands becoming unbearable as the adrenaline wore off. Much to my dismay, I had to stop. How much more could my body take? Maybe I needed more rest. I sat there straddling that tree branch, feeling the grooves in the bark against my legs. It hit me. I had my phone. I know how insane it sounds, that I never thought of that when this all started. But I rarely have my phone on me. I try to avoid using it. I don't want to set a bad example for Jemay. I pulled my phone out and dialed 911. What they were going to do, I have no clue, and I would never find out, because the phone never stopped ringing. I kept trying over and over. Never once did it pick up, never once did it go to voicemail. It was just a perpetual ringing, a sound I actually enjoyed because it was a break from the silence. Thinking back, not even the birds had made a sound, but this was a sound, one I would cherish. I must have sat for hours enjoying that tune because the sun was starting to set once again. I was failing Jemay, I know, but my body couldn't stand the idea of beginning the climb again. So I stayed right where I was. I pulled up the notes app on my phone and started typing out all this. I just wanted to kill some time, and who knows what was to happen to me. This way, maybe somehow, someone would find my phone and find Jemay if I couldn't. That leads me to now. My body is broken, maybe my mind too. But Jemay's smile is still pushing me to keep going, and I need to see it again. So if you're reading this, please find Jemay. What you just read was my notes from a few months ago. After what happened next, I completely forgot I had ever written this, but I figured I should finish it and post it here as a warning to others. I fell, I had lost consciousness. My body breaking down and unable to keep going, I gave in and slipped into the darkness. The next thing I knew, my body slammed into the ground, waking me up. It hurt, but I didn't even have time to process the pain before all the sights and sounds overwhelmed me. I was back in my backyard, back on that dewy, wet grass, surrounded by my wood fence, and looking up at the same tree this all began at. But it wasn't a happy sight. I was back on the ground finally, but Jemay wasn't. Laying on my back, I was facing the horrid sight of my little boy, eyes glazed over, twisted among the branches, and that same painful, toothless little smile stretched across his face. The birds were eating at him, taking my son from me piece by piece, using his body as a nest. I screamed. I wailed in horror and fear and sadness. My ball of sunshine was now a mangled corpse, food for the birds, but God, he was still smiling like he was home, right where he was meant to be. Nearing the end of my scream, I finally noticed that dreaded sound. My wail wasn't met by silence. No, I could hear the screams of neighbors. All the yelling was meeting in the air and making a twisted song for all to hear. Mothers, fathers, grandparents, all walking into their own backyards and staring at the horrors found in the trees. The kids had found the treehouse. My brother, Lou, has been trying to off me since we were kids. He was Daddy's favorite. His methods used to be amateur, foxglove mixed into my chili. A cheeky shove down the stairs at a fundraiser. New, a year younger, equally unhinged. He tried to slice my throat when I was 8. When you're rich, actions do not have consequences. From birth, we knew we were special. Knew we had to fight to inherit our father's fortune. If we fucked up, we either shifted the blame or covered it up. New killed a classmate in his sophomore year. One 5-minute phone call with our mother, and the boy never existed. Barali was the youngest, the smartest. She played people like cards. I wasn't any better, the stereotypical rich bitch. As long as we made donations, we could get away with anything. Zero consequences made killing each other easier. Zero consequences meant zero empathy. When we were 16, Barali tried to burn us, and the estate, alive. Daddy lectured us in his office. Going against him meant getting my gold card revoked. So I pasted on a smile. Sorry, Daddy. Slew? Daddy nodded at my brother, who rolled his eyes. Sure, he muttered. New didn't say anything, arms folded, gaze glued to the ceiling. Barely stood silently, a charred matchstick clenched between manicured nails. Hold hands, Dad instructed us. Now. We did. Reluctantly, I grabbed Barely's hand, who snatched Lou's. New, after exhaling a long, dragged-out sigh, accepted Lou's. It was humiliating. My blood boiled. My cheeks burned. Barali's hand was too cold. Lou's was too warm. Slimy. Barali drove the heel of her 800,000 stiletto into my toe when Daddy wasn't looking. Lou dug bloody half-moons into my palms. The two of them wore wide smiles for Daddy, perfect porcelain poker faces, while squeezing the breath from my lungs. Daddy's lips curved into a smile. That wasn't hard now, was it? He leaned forward. Daddy was old. Not normal old. Rotting corpse old. I expected him to be 6 feet fucking under by my junior year. I want my children to always be together, Daddy crooned. His tone held a terrifying authority I couldn't disobey. So we made an unspoken pact. When our father breathed his last breath, the killing game would continue. But Dad didn't die until I was 24, 98 years old. 8 years had passed. Enough years for resentment and hatred to fizzle out. Enough time for me to develop an attachment to my siblings. I cared that Lou was engaged. I cared that Barali and her girlfriend were trying IVF. I cared about New and his stupid private island full of stray kitties. So, the day that Mom called me crying with the news, I felt lost. Wrong. I retrieved my gun from my bedroom, the one I'd hid as a 16-year-old, promising myself I would shoot my siblings dead the moment our father croaked. Lou immediately tried to kill me when I turned up at his penthouse in the Silver Spire district, gun pointed between his eyes. I remembered how to find the perfect trajectory. But my brother wasn't stupid. He opened the door, kitchen knife already tracing the curve of my throat. New was sitting on his sofa, legs crossed, nursing his bruised eye. Barali leaned against the wall, cigarette between her lips, a golden lock of hair twirled around her finger. She'd been scalped, half of her ponytail ripped out. Lou's penthouse was trashed, his lounge resembled a war zone, couch tipped over, telltale splatters of blood staining rich marble. Wait, Lou whispered when I tried to pull out my gun. Ruby, wait. I let my hand drop, and in turn, he let his knife hit the ground. Dad left us a letter, he whispered, his breath heavy in my face. My brother held up an envelope sealed with Dad's signature. Before we dong anything, rash, he gasped out. We should probably read it. I surrendered my weapon. Right. Lou stepped back with a grin. Then we'll open it together. Barali and New joined us, and we ripped it open. The letter itself was folded into a tiny pocket square. I impatiently watched my brother unfold it, my hands already twitching to pull out the knife I'd hidden in my jeans back pocket. My dear children, Lou read out, holding the letter up to the light. Dad's writing was barely legible, written in intricate black ink. My final wish is for you to be together, Lou read out, his lips forming a smile. He let out a relieved breath, and I dropped all pretense, that feral, almost animalistic urge in my bones bleeding away. So, Lou continued, his voice breaking. His hands holding the letter began to tremble. I have organized a procedure to be conducted the second I take my last breath. He dropped the letter, letting out a hiss. What the fuck? I snatched it up, scanning the rest. Do not worry, I've tested it on animals and then human subjects. The full merge of the 4 of you, your bodies and minds melded together. That is my last wish. New snatched the letter off me and pulled out a lighter. "This never fucking happened," he hissed out, igniting the parchment under a dancing flame. "We never read it. The fucking thing never existed." I watched Dad's letter erupt into smoldering black. A sickly-looking Borali nodded, grabbing my hand. Then the door flew open. A suited man, a lancing flung over the top. He smiled widely. "The DVR siblings." "Ah, good. You're all here," he said. He led in several people wearing surgical masks. The man pulled on light blue gloves, already stained scarlet, and held up a syringe, filling it with blue liquid. "I'm here to fulfill your father's last wish." He nodded at me, lips splitting into a grin. "Ruby, you will be the head." For the last few months, my dog has been making weird faces at me when I turn to face him, a sickly, confused expression. Well, yesterday, I recorded him, and he was biting the air while my back was turned. His teeth snarled and his face twisted. I turned back, and he stopped, looking at me with that odd expression, as if he were about to vomit. One day, I just saw him staring at me as I did things, in still silence. His eyes followed my every move. The mirrors I set up showed me him staring at my back, every day, all day long. Well, today he attacked the back of my head, and I screamed, but before I did, someone else did too. I looked to my wound, thinking I was hearing things, until I pulled my hair back to examine the damage and reveal the face. Stray long hairs remained as they cascaded down the lumps and ridges of a wrinkled scowl. The eyes were empty sockets, the skin pulled over, leaving it blind with a mouthed gouge of gnashing teeth, chomping and talking as I looked at it in the mirror in utter disbelief and horror. I felt the back of my head, and the skin was tough and bristled like a man's 5 o'clock shadow. I lingered too close, and it bit me. Hard. I yelped, and it managed a dry and broken cackle, chomping endlessly as my blood dripped from its jagged bone teeth. A nose stuck out from it, cooked and scaly, broken and bloody now from being thrashed around. Sitting down in the middle of the basement, I cried, sobbing hot tears as my dog licked them away from my face, whining. I saw the knocked-over knife block beside me. Upon grabbing the largest knife, I began to slice. I sliced and sliced. The wet squishing and warmth of the blood was a stronger feeling than the pain. It was like it wasn't a part of me. The whole time, my sweet boy, Darren, sat in my lap, licking me as I went, his eyes back to the loving glance he always gave. It was nightfall when the rain began. The rhythm on the tin roof echoed through the empty gallery. "Glad I brought my umbrella," thought Liegel as she restocked the shelves. Books on medicine, others on statistics, numbers. She had always thought it a shame, the lack of fiction. To be expected. Who has time to read if the information isn't useful? At least that's what those upstairs would say. First, her studies had left her drained and longing for any reading outside her major. The campus archives could be described as clinical. The floor was a white tile, with circular blue light fixtures that hung every third step. The bookshelves were also white, though they had a rough texture in contrast to the mirror-like floor. Lost in thought, Lyle pushed down on the metal door handle and stepped outside. She opened her umbrella in the doorway before setting off. The usual sound of her heels against the concrete stairs echoed, despite the downpour, as she descended the walkway. Her apartment wasn't far. Down one street, a turn, then only a little further. The rain hammered against her umbrella. She could see the shadow of the droplets as they rolled across the clear plastic. "Excuse me?" Lyle spun around, looking for the source of the voice. "Who's there?" It was so dark she couldn't see far. Only a few steps ahead and the angular curb of the sidewalk. "My bad, I didn't mean to scare you." She caught a glimpse of movement, his jacket maybe, as he approached. "We talked at the archive? Unlike? If you remember? You following me?" "No, sorry. I guess I just thought I might not get to see you again, and, well, to be perfectly honest, I was hoping I could get your phone number, maybe." Lyle took a few steps back as she felt her heart beat even faster. I was definitely alone at the end of my shift. The archive was empty. That means he was waiting for me to leave? Her thoughts were interrupted as something struck her umbrella. Lyle gasped, gripping the handle tighter with her gloved hand. It felt heavier, as if something had landed on top. She glanced upwards through the clear material at the pink flesh. It looked like a meaty intestine slathered across. "What the hell is that?" asked Lyle, more to herself than the strange man. She felt the thing slide to the rim of the umbrella. She only had to give it a small shake then, and it splat against the pavement. "I have a pen, if you want to write it down for me." "Your number? Fine." Snatching the pen, she scribbled her number down. "Happy?" "Yes." Lyle turned on her heel and marched off, continuing towards her apartment. She glanced over her shoulder periodically along the way. He better not be following. If he was, she didn't notice. She found her apartment building. Under the cover of the doorway, she shook off her umbrella. She could see the gore drop off onto the pavement. Was it a dead bird that fell? She wondered, typing in the code to unlock the door. So gross. As the doors slid open, she walked through and turned down the hall. Elijah looked over her shoulder, a final check for the stranger. Her eyes widened in horror at the trail of bloody footprints left by her boots. Elijah sat upright, drenched in sweat. Snightmare. She couldn't remember the details. Clothes were scattered around the foot of her bed. The campus is closed Sunday, so no work today. She gathered up the clothing from the floor and threw them in the wash. The morning air was dead quiet, not unusual for the weekend. During the week, she would have heard the kids upstairs getting ready for school. She almost missed their voices now as she walked into the living room. She found the quiet unsettling. LaJail's eyes widened when she saw her boots on the mat. There was a puddle around them, clearly blood in the morning light. LaJail got a cloth from the kitchen to wipe them clean. The sound of the rain had gone quiet. "I left my umbrella on the porch last night," Lyle remembered. Hopefully it was washed by the rain. Pulling open the screen door, Lyle caught her first glimpse of the district since the rainfall. It was red. Even the morning mist was tinted by it. The leaves of the large chestnut tree were painted crimson, not due to the changing season. It stained up the side of the trunk and pooled around the roots. The sidewalk, too, was covered. Lyle felt a shiver run down her spine. She steadied herself against the doorframe, careful not to touch the dry blood. There must be something about this on the news. She turned towards the TV and flicked to the morning news channel. The screen displayed static. What in the world is going on? This feels like another nightmare. She began going through her contacts. Please pick up. Please pick up. Her mom's phone number went to voicemail. Not too unusual. It's still early. She called Temmie next, a friend from the university. He's usually up early. Next, her coworker Eoger, a cousin, Ima. Where is everybody? Her heart beat faster as each call went unanswered. The sight of the anomaly outside had left her shaken. Being cut off now, alone to face it, there was a firm knock on her apartment door. H? Hello? Lyle answered. Can I help you? She looked out through the peephole. There was a large figure on the other side. He was dressed in a dark brown jacket, the leather worn and peeling. Lyle could see his scruffy white beard. Hello there. His voice had a heavy accent. Where is everyone? I've been trying every door in the building. You've been the first to answer. Strange. Lyle paused, unsure of what to say. I tried calling a few people, but I didn't get any answers either. My name's Voss. The stranger introduced himself. I've been trying to find someone to help my daughter. Not acting like herself. She needs to get to the infirmary, but the buses aren't running. I was looking for someone to drive her. Oh, Lyle paused. I'm sorry, I don't have a car. Ah, all right, sighed Voss. Sorry to bother you then. Lyle heard the floorboards groan as his weight shifted away from her door. Wait a moment. She pulled the door open. The man was a giant. She needed to look up to meet his gaze. He was deeply pale, dressed in large black boots. Under his eyes were a pair of dark circles. I might be able to help, she told him. I'm studying medicine at the university. Maybe I could have a look for you? Voss nodded. She grabbed her boots from the mat before leaving. I didn't realize she was playing in the backyard until it was too late, Voss told her, leading the way. The rain started suddenly, and, next thing I knew, she came running inside, soaked completely red. I dried her off, of course, but it only seemed to get worse. She won't wake up this morning. They came to a halt at a narrow green door. Voss pushed it open, revealing the apartment. It was small, ordinary, the layout similar to Lyle's own living space. There was an island in the kitchen covered in dishes. Near the sink was a stack of beer cans. This is my daughter here, Aroa. She was laying on the couch in the living room, eyes shut. Her skin was as red as the chestnut tree outside. It was bloated, wrinkled, like she'd been in the bath for too long. Lyle stood frozen in shock for a moment. She blinked, refocusing on the task at hand. I'll try doing some tests, see if I can diagnose the problem. Thank you. Kneeling by the couch, Lyle reached out a hand to touch the girl's forehead. Her skin is freezing, Lyle said, looking towards Voss. I'll fetch the heated blanket. She's going to need a real doctor. Keep knocking on doors. We can't be the only people in this building. You all right? He had been gripping his jacket, the material above his heart. I'll be fine, he responded. I'll have another look around. Sure. Voss left the room, leaving Liesl alone with Aroa. She was breathing. Lyle could see her chest rise and fall as her lungs expanded and contracted. She gently reached under the girl's back and rolled her onto her side. Aroa jolted. Her muscles spasmed. Is she having a seizure? Aroa's eyes flicked open. Lyle could feel her own heart pounding as the girl sat upright. She stumbled back and crawled away from the child. The carpet was rough and covered in crumbs. She could feel the grime beneath her palms. Aroa swung her legs off the couch. Her legs wobbled like a newborn calf as she took a few tentative steps. Aroa, it's okay, Lyle said, trying to stay calm. Can you hear me? Aroa stumbled past, heading towards the doorway. She continued through the kitchen and out the apartment door. Aroa, came Voss's voice from the hall. What's come over you? Where are you going? I don't know what happened, said Liesl, joining Voss in the hall. Together, they followed the child downstairs and out of the building. Liesl gasped as they reached the transparent front doors. They weren't alone. I'll be damned, murmured Voss, wide-eyed, as they observed the crowded red street, swaying silent figures too numerous to count. Aroa was lost in the sea of wrinkled bodies. Aroa! Voss, wait! Lyle called after him. He was already out the door, wading through the masses. Lyle followed. It was easy to keep track of the big man. The top of his balding head towered over the crowd. Lyle did her best to ignore the empty expressions. She kept her gaze fixed upwards, eyes following the string of telephone poles. She could hear the hum of the power lines in the damp air. Above, the clouds looked heavy. "'Swon't be long before it rains again." ESE ornate and fractional patterns danced in the haze above. Liesl blinked, thinking it a trick of the morning light, but the shapes remained. One diverted from the group, arching through the air like an eel. It collided with one of the statue-like figures in the street. He was a young blond man dressed in a suit. As he was struck, the man began twitching. His brown eyes changed then, inflating, as if they were being filled with red liquid. They bulged out past the eyelids in a crazed expression. His blank stare changed to a look of almost hunger as he turned to look at her. Voss, I see it. The big man had come to a halt. Lyle reached him, looking back at the man with red eyes. It wasn't just the one other spectators descended, turning more of the dazed figures. Across the street, said Lyle. We can hide in one of the shops. Voss nodded in acknowledgement. Together, they waded through the crowd towards the glass doors. The red eyes followed. They reached the nearest building. It was a rundown print shop, displaying colorful titles in the window. The lights were out, but Lyle could make out rows of shelves further inside. Cardboard boxes littered the floor. To their right, a face turned. Her white teeth glinted as she lurched forward. Voss, Lyle shouted. Voss raised an arm to protect himself. The sound of wet, tearing flesh filled the air as her teeth sank into his wrist. Voss threw the woman off of him. Her body made a splat as it hit the pavement. Voss let out a pained grunt. Lyajal glanced up towards him. He gripped his chest near the heart. His eyes were clenched shut, his breathing fast. He stumbled. "No, Voss. What's wrong?" He swung an arm, pushing her away. "I'm not leaving you behind," Lyajal told him. "We just need to get inside." She turned towards the doorway and pushed hard on the handle. There was a jolt, the lock resisting her. "Just go." His voice sounded hollow. "Run." Lyle looked down at him, at the circular mark of teeth on his wrist. The blood ran down to his elbow. At his heart, he clenched a handful of his shirt. "Go," he told her again. The shambling figures continued to approach. Lyle fled. The sea of people continued, blank stares of strangers, eyes unseeing. She felt a buzz in her pocket. "Someone's calling me back," she thought finally. She hoped it was one of her family members. She slipped her phone out of her pocket. It was a call from an unknown number. "I'd be happy to hear from anyone," thought Lyle as she answered the call. "Oh, you did answer." He sounded nervous. "I wasn't sure if you would." "Hi. You're the guy from last night." Lyle instinctively glanced over her shoulder. "Don't hang up," Like pleaded. "I've already gone through everyone in my contacts, and you're the only one who answered." "The same happened to me. Tried calling and didn't hear from anyone. We might be the only two people left. Maybe. If we could meet, I might know. I'm capable on my own. We need to escape, don't we? Get out of this city. We'd have a better chance together. They're not letting anyone in or out." "What do you mean?" "At the entrance to the city, they've put up concrete barriers, shooting any of the things that get near. We should meet. Can we please meet at the archive?" "Fine," Ligel said. "See you there," and hung up. She felt a raindrop on the back of her neck. She shivered as she felt the wet splatter against her skin. The hairs on her back prickled as it rolled down her spine. Ligel pulled up her hood and kept walking. "Look, I'm not some helicopter parent, all right? If anything, I'm more easygoing than most of my friends with children. That's probably what got us into this mess in the first place. My little girl is a handful, to say the least. Attitude problem, authority problem, lying problem. Still, though, she's my little girl, my only child. It's my job to keep her safe and to maintain a good relationship with her. However, once the boy problem started, it was borderline maddening. I actually had to put my foot down and not just tiptoe around the situation. The first few guys were, subpar. Not at all what I wanted for her. First, it was some stoner kid named Droneban, who could barely keep his eyes open at our introduction dinner. Then it was this hotshot, daddy's money type of guy, named Exla, who, for the entire dinner, would not stop blatantly flirting with the waitress in front of all of us. I didn't even have to convince her to leave that one. She was so heartbroken that, as soon as the dinner was over, she pretty much demanded he never text her again. Oh, and who could forget Sarab, the high school quarterback who showed absolutely no interest whatsoever in anything other than sports, workout routines, and protein. Just back-to-back red flags over the course of what I want to say was about a year and a half. After her latest interest failed, she actually took a break from the guys, to my absolute relief. She focused on herself, studied hard, brought her grades up to a B average, and got closer with the family. It was nice. It was like we had our little girl back. That is, until she met Bojack. The thing about Bojack was, he was perfect. He had a good head on his shoulders, dreams of college, aspirations to become an accountant, and he was already holding down a job at the local shopping center. He actually paid for our dinner, all four of us, like it was nothing. Not even just that, but the entire night, he was an absolute joy to be around. Charismatic, maintaining eye contact, he literally had the entire table laughing, not even 30 minutes into the evening. It was all going so well that I didn't even flinch when my daughter planted a long kiss on his cheek before blushing and hurrying back to our car. Unlike with the other guys, she actually seemed to be in love with Bojack. I could see it in her eyes. Not to mention, in the 4 weeks since they started dating, there was a noticeable improvement in her attitude. She was maintaining her grades, being respectful, being honest, the whole shtick. I had a silent hope for the boy. A part of me truly believed that finally, I wouldn't have to worry about my daughter getting the treatment she deserved. All of those hopes were shattered in an instant, though, because, fuck it, of course they were. After my daughter had kissed him, Bojack didn't even seem to register what had happened. He just stood there, staring at me blankly. After what looked like a brief hesitation, he began walking in my direction, like he wanted to ask me something. Me, being the naive old dad that I am, thought that he was going to ask if they could go out again the next night. I was already mentally preparing my whole have her home by 9 speech. Unfortunately, that is not how it went. As he approached, he drew his shoulders back, standing confidently in front of me. And the first words out of his mouth were enough to have me on the brink of punching him in his mouth. "You have a lovely daughter, sir. She's gonna sell for millions." Their friends advised them to undergo a trial separation. They went on separate retreats to the Swiss Alps, but they realized it didn't help. So, they decided to divorce. Without a prenup, they argued bitterly. "I want 60% of the estate," the wife demanded. "Nonsense," the husband retorted. The wife grew furious and yelled, "You'd better listen to me, because I could kill you right now. If I weren't such a nice person, I would do it." The husband laughed and replied, "And how are you going to kill me? Remember when we went on our retreats?" The wife responded. "Well, I learned black magic very well. In fact, I became an expert. I could kill you right now if I wanted to." The husband roared with laughter. "You know what? Do it. I dare you." "Fine," the wife replied. "Give me some of your fingernails or a lock of your hair." The husband nodded. He looked at his hands and said, "Too short. I'll go cut off my hair in the conservatory and bring it back." When he returned, he found her surrounded by lit black candles, holding a wooden effigy in one hand and an obsidian dagger in the other. He handed her the lock of hair, and she wrapped it around the effigy and raised the dagger. "Don't say I didn't warn you," the wife yelled, and she stabbed the effigy. And the husband thought to himself, "I've always hated how she leaves clumps of her hair on the shower walls." 6 months ago, we were in a car accident. Udej suffered heavy brain damage. At the time, I didn't care. Anything was better than the alternative. I stayed at my husband's bedside, held his hand, and prayed he would come back. And he did, but he was different. When he first woke up, I felt like I could breathe again, like life had meaning again. Udej was always awkward, in a sweet way. He spoke softly, even his wedding vows were more of a whisper. But he was also loud, hilarious. His stupid sense of humor made him not just my lover, but my best friend. Before the accident, he was singing at the top of his lungs. Halfway through Poker Face, he drove straight into oncoming traffic. Speaking to his parents, I told them I knew something was wrong when he opened his eyes and stared straight through me. Like I was a stranger. Like all those memories we made, everything we were, had unraveled. He told his own mother to go fuck herself, his face red, eyes wild. "Get away from me," he kept screaming, spittle flying with every word. He flailed like he was restrained. "Get the fuck away from me." He spat at me when I kissed him, and smiled like a psychopath when I broke down. Speaking to my therapist, I always said the same thing: I can do this. But lately, denial was starting to taste sour, bubbling up my throat like soda pop. The truth was I couldn't. Not anymore. My husband was a shell. Lesa, Odeja's mother's eyes were raw when she opened the door. Unbrushed curls hung loose, and I could tell she hadn't slept. How could she, with Udeja screaming all night? Mrs. Trunnis's smile was strained. Half British, her accent was always comforting. She welcomed me inside. I could already hear my husband's twisted laughter from upstairs, a shiver crawling through me. "Why don't you come in?" I smiled politely, stepping inside. She made tea, and we sat down. "I was thinking," I spoke up, swallowing my sobs. Udeja's mom just stared off into space. "Mrs. Trunnis." I spoke louder, and she jerked. Her gaze was hollow. Are you enjoying the tea, Lisa? It's a special recipe. Her finger danced around the rim of her empty cup. Uday used to make it when he was little. Mrs. Trunis's voice cracked. Today, he told me he was going to stab me through the heart and hang my intestines. Her laugh exploded into a sob. I want to take Uday somewhere special. I choked on the words, letting them spill from my mouth like barf. When his mother's eyes lit up slightly, I pulled my lips into a smile. I know he's not supposed to leave the house, but maybe it will help him remember. Her lips twisted into a grimace. She tapped twice on her cup. And where exactly are you planning on taking? My son? I weighed my words. Our honeymoon spot? Lisa, I know you are his wife. She leaned forward, sharp eyes scanning me up and down. But if his parents cannot rouse life out of him, then I very much doubt you can. Mrs. Tronis. I smiled through gritted teeth. We've been going there since we were kids. It's just the valley. Something in her expression shifted. She knew the exact spot I was talking about. Tears filled her eyes, and she swiped them away. I'll bring him back before dinner, I promise. I felt like a kid again, knocking on her door and demanding Uday come play. Mrs. Tronis simply stood and turned away. I'm going to check the flowers in the backyard, she said, her voice wobbling. Remember, dinner will be at 6, shepherd's pie. I nodded, walked upstairs, and helped Uday into his wheelchair. You're a fucking bitch, he spat, as his father helped me lift him downstairs. Uday's threats fell on deaf ears as I wheeled him outside and helped him into my car. Uday's father offered me a hug, burying his head in my shoulder. Thank you, Lisa, he whispered. I nodded, jumping into the car and switching on the radio. Poker face. When Uday's father staggered up the driveway, I turned to my husband's smiling face. Admit it, Uday chuckled as I backed out. I'm a fucking great actor. My parents ate that shit up. I laughed, shoving him. Please. I had to method act, even when it was just us. Your psycho bitch of a mom would have noticed if it wasn't convincing. Truly Oscar-worthy, he giggled, leaning back. I enjoyed the sparkle in his eyes, his wide smile. Then we hit a speed bump. Uday's head smashed into the window. Fuck. I fucked up. I tried turning off the music, but in my panic I cranked it louder. His eyes flickered, suddenly wide and frightened. Lisa, he panted, lunging forward. What the fuck did you... I kept one hand on the wheel and reached over, just like I had when I jerked the wheel and sent us into the other lane while he was driving that day. I slammed my fist into his temple. Red dripped down his chin. There were always two Udays, one who was pushed down and the other who got to keep the body. I fell in love with the others. 1. The Uday cursed his parents for trying to push him down. The Uday who didn't ignore my fucking existence. The one whose parents tried to cut away, pretend he didn't exist. Shh. I hum as my husband's eyes roll back. I run my fingers through his hair, unable to resist a giggle. Go to sleep, babe. I elbow him. Harder. His head hits the window with a meaty smack. I switch the song and crank it up as he stirs. I prefer the other one. The tree had stood for more than 100 years. The community had gathered to protest its removal. They held signs and formed a line between the bulldozer and the oak. The developer stood beside his truck with the permits in his hand and waited for them to understand that their presence made no difference. You can't do this, one of the protesters said. That tree has been here longer than any of us. It's part of this community. It's a tree, said Vance. Wood and leaves. There are thousands just like it, and it'll make excellent mulch. He smiled. I own the land. The permits are signed. The zoning board has approved the development. You bribed them, someone shouted from the back. You think standing here holding cardboard signs is going to stop a bulldozer? He laughed. This is business, and business always wins. Make it quick, he called out to the operator. I want the lot cleared by the end of the day. The oak came down in sections over the course of an afternoon. When the tree was finally removed, Vance walked across the cleared lot and felt satisfied that the project could proceed on schedule. The first symptoms appeared 3 weeks later. His skin felt tight across his shoulders and back. He assumed it was sunburn from the site inspections, but the sensation did not fade. Over the following days, the skin began to harden. Not painful exactly, but rigid, like scabs forming across broad sections of his torso. He saw his doctor, who examined the affected areas and took tissue samples. The results came back inconclusive. The doctor referred him to a dermatologist, who referred him to a specialist who eventually admitted he had no explanation for what was happening. "I've never seen anything like this," the specialist said, reviewing the biopsy results. "The tissue samples show cellulose. I don't understand how that's possible." "Fix it," Vance said. "I don't know how," the doctor replied. He tried other doctors. He sought second and third opinions. The diagnosis was always the same. His skin was dry and painful, and the process was accelerating. No treatment showed any effect. By the second month, his feet had begun to change. They grew wider and thicker. The bones restructured themselves in ways that made walking difficult. His shoes no longer fit. He had custom orthotics made, but within a week, those no longer fit either. The scabs on his skin had spread to cover most of his body. He tried cutting them away with a razor, but they grew back overnight, thicker than before. The texture was rough and deeply furrowed. His joints had stiffened to the point where all he could do was stand. He spent most of his time motionless, conserving energy for essential movement. Months later, small green shoots pushed through the pores of his skin. He tried pulling them out, but they were rooted deep in his tissue, and removal caused bleeding that took hours to stop. He stopped trying to fight what was happening. He stopped seeing doctors. He sat in his chair and felt his feet growing heavier. The soles had split open, and root-like structures were emerging. He remained in the chair for days before he managed to crawl and drag himself to the bathroom. Then one night, he heard a voice. "Return what was taken." The voice came from outside, from the direction of the oak haven site. "Return what was taken." He crawled to the door, down the front steps, and across the yard while the voice grew louder and guided him forward. He finally reached the oak haven site. The townhouses were half built. He crawled to the center of the lot where the oak had stood. The ground was bare dirt, packed hard by construction equipment. The ground beneath him softened. His feet sank into the soil. He felt the earth pulling at him gently, then stronger. His feet extended downward. His arms branched toward the sky. The ground pulled him down. The construction crew arrived the next morning and found a human-sized sapling growing in the center of the lot. It had not been there the day before. The project manager came by later that afternoon and ordered the crew to leave the tree alone. They built the townhouses around it. They constructed the central courtyard with the sapling at its center. The tree grew unbelievably fast. By the time the first residents moved in, the tree had grown tall enough to provide shade. No one questioned where it had come from. Sometimes on windy nights, the residents heard sounds that seemed almost like cries, but trees creaked all the time.